Another embarrassing performance by the defense sinks another incredible Dak performance. Where do the Cowboys go after their 30-27 loss to the Panthers? We'll provide some guidance on the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Cowboys podcast your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Landon McCool, and this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda, Move and Be Moved. We have a lot to discuss in this show today, including another horrible defensive performance that sunk the Cowboys' chances. We'll also discuss what recourse the Cowboys even have at this point in the season to deal with this awful defense and the defensive coordinator that is currently leading it. But first, let's discuss some of the positives of the game, all right? Before we sink down into the mud and discuss how terrible the defense was, which it was absolutely awful, let's discuss a little bit of what the offense did. And honestly, you know, discussing the offense itself is a little bit depressing because it just makes you realize how much of a wasted opportunity there was. The Cowboys got another MVP level performance from their quarterback who was missing his starting wide receiver, two of his starting offensive linemen, and was able to move the ball. And also, despite the fact that the Cowboys offense was unable to run the football, it does feel like the fact that you had backup offensive line kind of finally caught up with you this week when you played a team that had three really quality interior defensive tackles who all three really made themselves be felt. I thought Robinson and Brown specifically really had a good game, and it stymied the Cowboys running attack. And so basically the Cowboys offense had to operate in the passing game alone. It was one of the only things that was working for this team, but it was working incredibly well. Dak Prescott ended up 25 of 34 for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was led by George Pickens' 9 catches for 161 yards and 1 touchdown. It felt like outside of the first and the last drives that the Cowboys were basically able to move the ball almost seemingly at will. There was one other punt. I'll go over the drive list right now. The Cowboys had their first 3-and-out punt, which, you know, I mentioned up front. Then they went field goal, touchdown, end of half, punt, touchdown, field goal, punt. So the Cowboys offense was doing a great job moving the ball. They were able to convert on third downs. They struggled a little bit on earlier downs, especially because the run game seemingly just didn't have any juice. There was nowhere for them to run. I think they averaged some under 3 yards a carry. It may even be 2.5 yards. So, yeah, just not a great day for the Cowboys offensive line as far as moving bodies. But as far as protecting the quarterback, they did a great job. Dak had plenty of time back in the pocket, was able to kind of get through all his progressions, was able to find open receivers and complete passes and convert even in some several long down situations. Threw the ball into the end zone 3 times. And was doing excellent work pre-snap, getting them into the right play. I thought that for the most part, the Cowboys offense, once again, kind of did what they had to do. Jake Ferguson, added 33 yards and a touchdown. You saw a little bit of Ryan Flanoy, who had a couple of different catches and conversions, which were nice. So it felt like the Cowboys had what they needed on the offensive side of the ball to win the game. But it didn't feel like, the defense obviously reciprocated. Now, as I mentioned, the run game wasn't perfect. The offense wasn't perfect. There was some aspect of the offense that I think we need to discuss, and it specifically needs to start with that 3-game sequence that happened at the end of the game. The last 3-and-out the Cowboys had before they gave up the ball to the Panthers for, I think the last 6 minutes of the game. They never got the ball back. So I think if just wanted to go over that play calling sequence real quick, because I do feel like it was a frustrating sequence for a lot of us. It felt like, that they were trying to, we know what they called. The first down, they threw a play action bootleg rollout throwback screen. So if that sounds like a lot, it's because it was a lot. A lot of things happened on that play, which meant it was a very long developing play. They play actioned Dak kind of drifted to his right a little bit in a bootleg kind of motion. And then the idea was that he was going to be throwing the ball all the way back to the flat with a screen that was being set up, but it took way too long. The blitz that the Cowboys were likely anticipating on first down never showed up. And what ended up happening is Dak turns around, throws the ball. It took entirely too long. The defense read it the whole way. The defense tackled Williams for, I think, a 5-yard loss. And then they the second play, they go out and try to run what felt like kind of another designed swing pass, almost similar to what we saw with Lipke last week, I think it was, when he converted that third down. That was actually a play that I pointed out, where they tried to swing it out almost like a mini screen with one blocker ahead. But again, it just, the Panthers had seen the tape on it. They knew what was coming. They anticipated it, and it was another 5-yard loss. And the Cowboys get into a situation now where they're in 3rd and 20 plus. And so, of course, they kind of run a third screen, which, was really just kind of a give up at that point. But just a really frustrating sequence. Obviously frustrating, just like with the results and what the results of each play meant for the play calling on the next play. The blown up screen kind of begat the attempt to try to get something going with a little swing pass, which begat a give up screen on third down. Just really frustrating stuff, especially since the Cowboys knew that they needed to score points there. They needed to put up more points to win this game. I don't think that the Cowboys anticipated that they were not going to get the ball back again and that was going to be their last possession. I think if they felt like that, they probably wouldn't have punted on fourth down, even, or at least gone down the field on third down a little bit to put themselves in a situation where they could go for it on fourth down. But just frustrating situation near the end of near the end of the game that really kind of, you don't really want to blame the offense for having one bad sequence, right? Because obviously the defense is the glaring issue here, but the offense at this point has to understand that, they're not getting anything from the defense. The defense, isn't going to get the ball back and give them another stop. They've got to take full advantage of these situations and get as many points as possible, because their defense is simply not going to be able to consistently stop anyone, it feels like. And that's based on all the facts and theories of everything we've seen in this game so far. So, we're definitely going to break down the defense. There's a lot to talk about there. But, again, on the offensive side, it felt like Dak did the lion's share of work. He did what he could to try to make this team relevant, to keep this team in the game. I felt like he played at like a MVP level, but unfortunately it just wasn't enough at the end. And the Cowboys ended up, ceding the ball back to the Panthers with 6 minutes and never got the ball back, which is pretty shocking. So we'll talk about the results of what happened and then what we need to do to try to fix it next. The old saying, look good, feel good? The problem is that most dress clothes only check one of those boxes. They look sharp but feel stiff, hot, and high maintenance. And that's why there's Mizzen & Main. Mizzen & Main makes classic menswear with performance fabrics, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel comfortable. They actually invented the performance fabric dress shirt over 10 years ago, and they've perfected it ever since. And guys, I'm thrilled that they did, because I was wearing one of these shirts out the other night. I was at dinner. I got a ton of compliments on it. It was warm. We sat outside. It was warm outside, but I was still cool because of the performance fabrics, kept me cool. I got home, and normally I would change out of my nice clothes because we're done with dinner and I'm being comfy. But the shirt was so comfortable, I just kept it on the entire time, finished my evening with it, and that just shows you how comfortable these shirts are. Right now, Mizzen & Main is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com with promo code LOCKEDONNFL20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Main, MAIN.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL20 for 20% off. And if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen & Main stores in select states. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. And this week's moment that moves the game forward is Dak's 34-yard touchdown to George Pickens in the third quarter. It was a thing of beauty. They were in the middle of a no-huddle situation. They needed to score a touchdown to kind of keep them in the game in the third quarter. Dak gets up to the line of scrimmage. He made a whole bunch of adjustments based on his pre-snap look. He got them into the right play. They called the slant to Pickens, who caught it on the run and ran through the secondary all the way to the end zone. And that was a play that moved the game forward. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And having to discuss the defense is going to be probably the death of me, but we have to break it down. It's a game breakdown, and we're all here to suffer together, unfortunately. So let's get into it. Look, I think one of the first things that we talked about all throughout the week was that the Panthers were a very efficient and very good first down team, right? They run the ball well on first down. They throw the ball at their best on first down. The best situations were for the Dallas Cowboys defense was to try to get them into obvious passing down situations. That's where they kind of can struggle a little bit. Bryce Young isn't just that kind of quarterback necessarily that is going to be converting a lot of third and long situations. And frankly, this offensive line wasn't necessarily, I think, up for the task for a lot of those situations, as the Cowboys later in the game did start to show a little bit of pressure at certain points. But the Panthers didn't ever really need to worry about that because there were very few situations in which the Cowboys won or had any sort of success on first down. And that's where the Panthers consistently were gashing the Cowboys. I think at one point going into halftime, the Panthers were averaging over 7 yards a play. I think Dowdle ended up averaging 6 yards a carry, but I think before halftime it was well over 6.5, 6.6. And the Panthers were just moving the ball at will. And really, short of a fumble pitch play that happened with 44 seconds before the half, and then I think a penalty, if I'm not mistaken, right after that, the Cowboys wouldn't have had very many stops at all in this game. And in fact, if you just look at the drive summary, they frankly didn't. It was for the Cowboys defense, and for the Panthers offense, it was field goal, the interception that clanged off of the receiver's hands and went right into Wilson's hands, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt, field goal. So they had no problem moving the ball and scoring outside of the obviously early interception, which came off of Tedro McMillan's hands and right into Wilson's hands. The Cowboys defense was really unable to kind of get anything going. And like I said, when they were able, the only opportunities they had to kind of get off the field or create a punt situation was when they won first down, when they limited them to under 4 yards on first down and made them work in second and third downs, get behind the chains, and you saw them kind of be a little bit more human. But outside of that, you just saw, Rico Dowdle, just have yourself a day, man. You came in and you talked all week about it, and you backed it up in a way that the Cowboys certainly weren't able to stop him. 30 carries for Rico Dowdle, 183 yards, another 4 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. Just a dominant performance, and the Cowboys didn't seem to have the ability to kind of do anything to stop him or slow him down. This performance really felt a lot like last year's defense, right? Where it wasn't as much of huge plays down the field in the passing game. Although Dowdle did have the 36-yarder and J.C. Horn had a 30+ yarder as well. There were certainly the busts in coverage that we've seen this year that are have been kind of more of a 2025 situation than a 2024 situation. But I think what the real issue in this game specifically was a complete inability to stop the run. A complete inability to kind of get into your fit correctly. It felt like they were using wrong leverage. It felt like the edge was being collapsed. It was being blocked off. The Cowboys didn't seem to have any kind of answer when they were running to the edge. It was really brutal to watch. And at the end of the game, it felt like the Panthers were in complete control when they had the ball. The Cowboys were kind of just helpless to allow them to do anything. That first drive out of the half, the Panthers ended up going 80 yards on like 2 plays, and I'm sorry, on like 4 plays that included 2 30-plus yard plays in it. So, yeah, I mean, it just felt like the Cowboys were unable to kind of make any kind of stop. There were certain guys who felt like, were playing well at times. I mean, Shamar James ended up with a bunch of tackles again, but I don't think it means anything if you're making the tackle 6 yards off the line of scrimmage. So it was really brutal to see how many holes there were, where there's constant confusion in the secondary. People weren't sure what was happening. Busts in coverage, like we mentioned. It just felt like the defense looked lost. And I think that's what's so incredibly frustrating about this, is that it's not even just like a talent issue at this point. It's not even, it feels like if you replace a guy here or there, that's going to be enough. It's like you need to replace several players and then probably change your defensive coordinator all in this season. And, I don't know if that's a realistic thing to do this year. So we'll talk more about that in the next segment. But, just kind of watching this team and just seeing the sort of just fast or famine is like what you hope for this defense to come to. But most of the time it's just famine. It's frustrating, right? And again, in the context of what your offense is doing and how well they're performing, to be able to not even be able to put up any kind of resistance against a team like the Panthers, which, isn't exactly a high flying offensive unit. It's not a good indication of where this team is for this season. And because the issues are kind of so systemic, it feels like it's multiple personnel issues. It's a scheme problem, or at least a lack of understanding the scheme problem. I don't think it's necessarily that the X's and O's don't work. I think it's that this team just doesn't understand the X's and O's, and they haven't been taught the details the way that they need to be in order to perform well in this defense. So, it's humbling, in a lot of different ways, to watch that defense go out on the field and see how bad they are in a variety of different areas: run defense, pass defense, and again, not just getting outperformed physically, but also just looking confused, looking like they don't know what they're supposed to be doing on a certain play. Guys getting 15 yards behind the defense, and no one really is certain who's supposed to be over there covering that guy. It's stuff like that, week in and week out, and it's not getting better. It feels like it's getting worse. That really makes you question what is exactly the plan, and what can you even do about this defense. Is there even enough to be done this season to save us in this defense? More on that next. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 HVAC and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Want to avoid a false start on your project? Need parts fast? Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. Join the Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets back if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love betting on game day. I love, getting an itch and getting a feeling and then hopping on it and making a bet. It just gives a little bit extra edge when you're sitting on the couch watching 12 games at once. You pick one out, you want to put some money down, and hopefully it gives you a little bit more zest to your Sunday afternoons. And whether you're a casual fan or loving diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. It makes football watching even more exciting when you've got a little bit of something riding on the action. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And, after diving into this defense, if you're not feeling furious and angry and wanting to do something about it, you're probably not so much of a Cowboys fan. But I think that when you examine our list of options, none of them are great. And that's the real problem. I think that where we are right now with this whole situation is that, it feels like Eberflus deserves to be fired. It feels like this team is not responding to his leadership. But is firing Eberflus something that is even going to help this team at all this year? Is it something that is that it can even be improved upon? I think that's where I'm at now. Is last week we talked about the fact that the Cowboys really needed to win this game and then probably the Washington game. And then you would feel like this team was worthy of kind of investing on and trying to improve in the 2025 season to see what you can do to kind of build around this defense to help support what feels like a really, really good offense, a top offense in the NFL. And I think that, after watching this week, it's hard to kind of look at what's going on and feel like, hey, you can make a couple of changes here and there and get this defense where it needs to be. And suddenly, you could be a playoff team. I just feel like this was such a kind of disheartening performance by this defense. I mean, they ended up giving up, I think it was 6.4 yards per play on defense against the Panthers. It's not like the Panthers are world beaters on offense. And that's the issue, I think, is that it's, bad performance, obviously bad results, bad process. The scheme seems bad. It just seems like everything about this is just not working. But trying to replace a defensive coordinator in the middle of the season is also something that, is not necessarily a guaranteed success. I mean, you look around at what your options, like, let's just play the hypothetical out a little bit. What happens if you fire Matt Eberflus, right? What's your plan then? Well, you're probably going to have to look internally. I mean, otherwise, we can talk about external candidates, but, first of all, any candidate who you would be hiring that's worth the salt, doesn't want to take over a job halfway through the season. I think that's, someone like Mike Zimmer probably would hang the phone up if you tried to call him. Not that would be a good solution anyways, because it's such a different, a weird vibe change. And I think that's the other issue too, is that, mid-season is not exactly the best time of year to be changing your defensive scheme, right? Like you don't really have the time to install like you do like the preseason and training camps and OTAs and mini camps. That's why you have all that. So any defensive coordinator that's coming in here is more than likely just taking up the calls in the system that was set up by Eberflus and then just making the calls on their own, which, it kind of doesn't really solve the issue that we're having at this point if we feel like that the players are not ingesting the defense as a whole. So I guess the question then becomes, like, if you're going to fire Eberflus and you're probably going to promote from within, who is that person? I mean, are you talking about Dave Borgonzi? Are you talking about Andre Carter? Are we talking about Aaron Whitecotton? Because none of those guys, even though they all have 10 to 12 to 14 years of coaching experience, none of those guys have ever been a defensive coordinator or have called defenses at any level, as far as I know, in their coaching career. So there isn't a real clean, solution here as to what's next after firing Eberflus. You may have to think about going outside the building to get someone, which just doesn't feel like it's necessarily a great idea. However, talking out of both sides of my mouth, I also understand the idea that, it probably can't look much worse, right? Like it's as bad as it is. I don't know that it could be much worse. And I do think that there is something to the idea that if you don't do something, that you lose the locker room a little bit. And I think that this is a tough situation for Schottenheimer right now, where, he's performing admirably. We feel like the offense is doing its job for the most part. There was certainly some things that we just talked about earlier in the show that felt like could have been done better. but I feel like for the most part, you're satisfied with where Schottenheimer has led this team, how he's led this team. You're satisfied with the offense and the way it's being called as a whole. And it doesn't feel like this is a shoddy issue as far as the scheme and the personnel parts of what's going on the defense. So Shoddy's got a tough decision to make, right? Like, how does he solve this while trying to improve the situation without ruffling feathers and hurting, the relationships he has with the people inside the building? Because it's sounding more and more like the players are frustrated with this situation as well, right? Like, obviously Diggs had a meeting with the coaching staff, talking about playing more man coverage. They've asked, the coaching staff if they're willing to make some changes to kind of play to the team's strengths, but it doesn't feel like it's moved the needle too much. Seemingly they're playing still a ton of zone. They didn't blitz very much in this game once again. So it just feels like there is a point in which if you don't make a change, you could lose the locker room, and that could present its own problems. That could present, a long-term issue that you don't want to have. So the Cowboys have a lot of decisions to make about how they want to handle the defense moving forward, because neither solution that is being presented to them right now appear to be really great options. So the Cowboys kind of need to have a come to Jesus meeting a little bit with their coaching staff, figure out how they're going to solve this, and if they're trying to angle to be better this year, or if they're just punting and looking at the situation for next year. Well, that's it, guys. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Cowboys show your first listen of the day. The NFL season is finally here. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler, the Madman Rowland, gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll be back with Marcus next week. Make sure you join us then.